I call Chris Hipkin.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. This is where the budget spin starts to become unravelled. Because while the National Government in their budget on Thursday proclaimed that they were going to do something for New Zealanders who were feeling left behind, for New Zealanders who were struggling to get ahead, the reality is, when you break it down, when you get through the spin, actually this budget penalises those people some more. So let's look at some real examples of real people that might be affected by the changes in this year's budget. And let's take someone who is on an unemployment benefit for the average amount of time. And bear in mind, despite all of the rhetoric, that people are typically on the unemployment benefit for less than 6 months at a time. You might not know that when you hear the rhetoric about the unemployment benefit, but the average person who has one is on it for less than 6 months. So let's assume that they're on it for 6 months on the unemployment benefit and they have children. They would benefit by about $650 from the changes that the government have proposed to increase their benefits. Let's say they then get a job, and this is the first time in their life that they have a job with sufficient income to sign up for KiwiSaver. They lose $1,000. That's the reality. So the National Government gives them $650 with one hand, takes $1,000 off them with another. That is the reality. Break down the spin, go through it, and then you work out, actually they're not going to be better off, they're going to be worse off under the government because they are giving a small amount with one hand and taking a larger amount with the other. That is the reality, and there are everyday New Zealanders who will be in that position. Because when they talk about beneficiaries on the other side of the house, they only ever talk about the people who are on a benefit for a long time, and they neglect to tell the public every time that the vast bulk of New Zealanders who rely on some form of benefit do so for a short period of time. It's a stopgap measure for them when they find themselves in hardship, and this government neglects to tell the public about that. They're happy to stereotype people living on benefits when actually the vast bulk of people who are on a benefit for a short period of time, and they will be penalised by this because they will lose the opportunity to get the $1,000 KiwiSaver kickstart, and I think that is wrong. I think it is wrong that somebody who signed up their child for a benefit, for a KiwiSaver, on Wednesday gets $1,000 and somebody signing them up on Friday doesn't. That is simply unfair. It is unfair that the government did not signal this. It was never promised in their manifesto. So New Zealanders had the comfort of knowing that at some point in the future, if they found themselves in a position to start joining up to KiwiSaver, that kickstart would be there. Had they known, had the government had the decency to give them warning, they could have signed up and got the $1,000 kickstart. And the government know that, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be here under urgency backdating this legislation to budget day and robbing all of the New Zealanders who aren't in KiwiSaver with the opportunity to sign up and get the $1,000 kickstart. And let's just be clear here. The people who are in KiwiSaver, now are more than likely to be in middle and upper income brackets. It is the people in the lowest income categories who struggle to get into KiwiSaver, and yet that is something that I know they aspire to. Aspiration used to be something the National Party was proud of. And now, if someone's on a low income and aspires to be in KiwiSaver, they are kicking them in the guts by taking away the $1,000 kickstart that middle and upper income earners benefited from. This is another kick in the guts to people on low incomes and to future generations of New Zealanders. To the tertiary graduates who will be leaving university or polytech or their apprenticeships and moving into full-time, fully paid employment for the first time, signing up to KiwiSaver, they've lost the $1,000. And of course we know the tertiary students continue to be hammered by this government as well. It is simply unfair. The National Party hated KiwiSaver from the beginning. It was a package of measures that John Key called communism by stealth. Let's not forget that. When Working for Families and KiwiSaver were introduced and by the last Labor government, a government that I should remind people produced 9 surpluses in a row to national 7 deficits, when we used those surpluses and the good economic times to introduce KiwiSaver to save for the future, to boost family incomes through Working for Families, to reduce the burden on students by interest-free student loans, John Key railed against those policies and called them communism by stealth. They hate KiwiSaver, and that is absolutely evident from the very first moment they became government. What did they do? When they first became government, they cut the member contributions. That was cut number one. Mr. Chair.
Chris Hipkins.
Mr. Chair, they cut the member contributions. They then cut the member fee subsidy of $40 per annum. That was cut straight away. They cut employer contributions. This was all happened straight away. They halved the size of KiwiSaver straight away in their first budget, and they ceased to provide the employer tax credit. That was all those 4 cuts, all made in their first budget. Those were the first of the KiwiSaver cuts made by the national government. But then they came back. They came back in 2011 and they had another go, and they halved the member tax credit in that year as well. This was yet another cut, and then they made further cuts to KiwiSaver, and now this is the latest one. 8 cuts all up this government have made to the KiwiSaver scheme since they came into office. There's a government that hates KiwiSaver, and yet Bill English knows. Bill English knows in his heart of hearts, and they all know in their heart of hearts, that New Zealand still has a savings problem. We still have a savings problem. Anybody looking at the wider set of New Zealand's accounts knows that we're spending more than we're earning, and that has been the case for a very long period of time. KiwiSaver was one of the measures introduced to try and curb that, to try and get New Zealanders saving more. And it was a good measure, and it still is a good measure, and I'm pleased it is still there. But we should be looking at getting more people into KiwiSaver and putting more money into KiwiSaver, because it is a key part of making sure that New Zealanders break even and make ends meet. And we heard a lecture from Nick Smith about the opposition not being able to get their numbers to add up. This government haven't managed to get their numbers to add up for 7 years, because if they did add up, we wouldn't be in deficit. For 7 years, their numbers have not added up. They have been in deficit every year. And what does that mean? It means borrowing. They have been borrowing every year that they have been in government. They have been contributing to the problem of New Zealand as a country spending more than it earns. And we have to deal with that. And Bill English knows in his heart of hearts that that's a challenge for New Zealand. So why is it that time after time he comes to the House and proposes cuts to one of the few things that we're doing that are designed to turn that around and to increase our savings rate? Then, of course, we've got the government saying, well, actually, you can cash up your KiwiSaver for your first home deposit. That was something that the Labour Party has supported as well. But isn't it sad that we've reached that reality now, where New Zealanders, even if they cash it up, can't afford to buy a first home, and for those who are in the middle income brackets who can, they're having to face a trade-off between saving for their retirement and buying their first home. I think that's a tragedy. Now, I think it's a short-term stopgap measure. It's good. It's a good way to get people onto the home property buying ladder. But long term, we've got to look at other things. We've got to look at ways that people can own a home and save for their future. And furthering KiwiSaver by making sure that there's good incentives to join, by making sure that we're increasing contributions to KiwiSaver, whether it be through government contributions, employee contributions and the like, that will all make New Zealand a richer country in the long term. Instead, what we're seeing with the current government is that they are content to manage things for today and not ahead for the future. So many of the things in this year's budget are designed to create the illusion of doing something, but they don't. When you break down the spin, when you look at it, they're not actually helping the people they claim to be helping. And I want to just reiterate that point that I made. Somebody who is moving off a benefit and into work, if they've been on a benefit for 6 months, which is about the average time that someone's on an unemployment benefit, they would have benefited by $650 through the increase in benefits, and that's great. And I think that they would enjoy that, and I think that they would find that as a welcome relief. But they finally get into work. They finally get to join KiwiSaver for the first time, and they find that not only is that $650 taken away from them, another $350 is taken away as well, because they lose the $1,000 KiwiSaver kickstart that they otherwise would have got. That's the reality. So let's break down the spin. Give a small amount with one hand, take a larger amount with the other hand. That is the reality of what the current government are doing. KiwiSaver is a good scheme. The kickstart has resulted in a whole heap of people joining KiwiSaver. Removing the kickstart penalises people who, for whatever reason...
Point of order, Joan Hayes.
The member is not even addressing the actual clause, the title, Mr. Speaker.
This part of the debate on this clause is wide-ranging. It will continue to be wide-ranging for some time yet. When we get into the other clauses, they are much narrower, and so that will be enforced most closely. Chris Hipkins.
Speaking to the point of order.
Point of order. Michael Woodhouse.
Mr. Speaker, as I understand it, there was no leave sought for these clauses to be taken as one.